So excited that you're joining us. I don't even know what episode this is, but
20.
we don't know. I don't know.
8, maybe. I don't
7,
know. 9,
8,
30.
30. I don't know. I don't even know what episode it is, but man, I'm excited to get back together and to talk. And I just want to say welcome to everybody who's joining us on whatever platform that you are watching or listening. We love to have you as part of our X Podcast family. And, you know, as always, we love to hear from you. Yeah. So we just want you to know that you can always reach out to us and shoot us an email to podcast@thex.church. And today I have just my good friend. This is an all more podcast as well.
It is. A little bit more of just kind of an intimate. The table is shrunk.
Yeah, it's an intimate setting.
It is. Something, I just had to say this, demonic is happening outside.
Snow?
Right now.
Not at the time people
I don't know
this,
when you see this. Maybe this is, dating this podcast episode, but it is late April, and it is snowing outside.
Snowing. Yeah, it is. It's done snowing.
Oh, okay.
That's just a reminder of what we have been freed from.
Okay.
That's what it is.
I think it's a reminder of the fall.
Reminder of the fall of mankind in the world. Yes, it is. So it's just you and me today. We thought we'd just kind of
just the two of us.
I feel like there's a song in that.
There is.
Okay, we won't start singing.
Will you sing it?
No.
Okay.
But I know Kevin will be back on our podcast soon. He has taken a little hiatus for his baby girl, Demi, and they are getting used to life with 3.
Yeah.
And all under age 4 and under.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's crazy.
That's a fun house.
Yeah. It's a fun house that I'm glad I'm not living in. I get to go play with their kids every once in a while, and that's good for me.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you've been keeping up, but there's been a lot of drama in the UK. So, I don't know if you saw all of the stuff with Prince William and Prince Harry.
Yeah.
And then we just saw that, Prince Philip passed away recently. Depending on, again, when you see this.
This is like the making of a movie. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces. They're making this fascinating.
What was the big talk of the town culturally was Harry going to go back for the funeral?
Yeah.
After the sit-down interview. Was it with Oprah? I think it was with Oprah. And Meghan
Markle.
And,
which, by the way, I've been watching her lately. That sounds creepy, but I've gotten
Oprah or Meghan?
Meghan Markle.
Okay.
I finally got into the series Suits.
Oh yeah.
Yep, on Peacock, and it's amazing. So
really,
has nothing to do with it.
I've not seen it at all.
Yeah. So anyways,
but that just exploded some things, and some things were said that caused a little bit of a rift in the UK and the royal family. Yeah. And then it was interesting was the funeral and just seeing Prince William and Harry back together and the beef they had. And it just made me think that I'd love to have a little bit of a conversation about dealing with conflict, dealing with conflict, and just even as I was thinking about it, and they made kind of such a big deal out of them, and I think they talked for like an hour. I don't know. About the whole aspect of coming together to like face to face and having to address the things that were said in conflict. To be a fly on the wall would have been fun in that one. But, we talked about recently on our podcast about how we are living in such a polarizing culture. And I think we feel the effects of it. It's everything seems so divisive. Everything's been over politicized. Technology. So we had your cousin on.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. He's a smart guy.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Oh, man, I played him in chess, and he beat me. That did not like that. But
he beat me, too.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
And he acted so much. He was like, I don't even play much.
Oh, I know.
I don't buy it for a second. But anyway.
Me and you need to play.
Yeah, we'll play.
Okay.
We should play chess while we do a podcast sometime.
Who would watch that?
We could just get Kevin off, and we could have had, I don't know.
You just play chess for an hour.
Yes, but we could do that while we're talking.
Okay.
We could have done that.
Maybe.
I thought about it a little too late. That would have been a lot of fun.
That would have
been. And so
for the people watching.
Yeah, for the people watching, listening, that would have been really boring. But you could still listen to a podcast. But I just one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of dive back into this conversation. I did a message recently where I said some things pretty direct to our church. And really,
but went over so well.
It did. I did it
so good.
with just with grace, and I tried to do it with humility. Like I wasn't trying to berate anybody. That wasn't the point. But the trend is kind of what I have seen in our culture that I wanted to address in the sense of our community.
Yeah.
Because we do. When you're in a church, you're in a community. And everybody you probably have community that you're a part of, even if you don't go to church. You have family initially, and maybe work community, friends, people you hang out with. And I think one of the things that I see in our culture today is that everything is so divisive, it's so explosive, that it's so easy with technology these days that all we do is just unfollow. Yeah. We just unfriend. If someone makes us mad, we go and we attack their throat with a comments and go at it. And I feel like, in a way, I just wonder if we're losing some interpersonal relationship skills. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's interesting when I was watching all of this with the royal family is what a reminder that, first off, that the richness and beauty of life is made up of relationship. Yeah. So most of us know, I think, innately that money can't buy happiness. Yeah. But there's a part of us that still kind of hopes and still kind of dreams of it.
Working toward it.
But isn't it fascinating? For me, it's fascinating to watch. I mean, this is the height of the heights when it comes to money, wealth. I mean, it's literal royalty. Notoriety. And yet wealth cannot, no matter how much money you have, that cannot exceed or cover up or make up for where there's relational conflict. Yeah. And some of it's unavoidable. That's not putting that on them, but it just goes to show that you can never make so much money to where you escape the reality of you're going to have to decide how you navigate relational conflict and how you engage in confrontation and how you go through the waters of hurt.
Well, and I agree. I think at the core of who we are designed for relationship. And what you're saying is it doesn't matter what level, what stage of life, where it is. If our relationships aren't good, nothing's good. Yeah. I mean,
I think, to me, the concept is so important because I think you laid it out well. And I think you have several factors that create a perfect storm to where perhaps one of the greatest skills in life is relationship skills, interpersonal skills, because if life is made up of relationships, everything's made up of relationships. Yeah. Whether it's career, family, love, friendships. I mean, and even friendships. I love what C.S. Lewis once said. He said, friendships aren't necessary for survival, but friendships give survival meaning. That relationships and friendships and love is what makes life even worth living. Yeah. Which means that I think it's safe to say the greatest skills you can have, as great as money handling skills or the skills for your career or the skills for whatever, the greatest skills are interpersonal skills. But it seems like
we don't teach that in school.
We don't teach that.
That doesn't make sense.
And I've thought about this a lot lately. And
jacket's coming off.
Because to me, this is perhaps one of the most important topics ever, because we've talked a lot about EQ. Yeah. And how even statistics are in, both Christian and secular statistics, that your EQ is a higher predictor of your success in life than your IQ.
Absolutely.
But your EQ all has to do with the interpersonal relationships that you have. How you manage, over the last few years as a staff, we've gone through several business books. Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Right now we're going through Chad Veach, his book on leadership, and it's called Help, I Work with People. Yeah. And it's that whole thing of there are people that could be great CEOs, that could run businesses, but at the end of the day, if you don't know how to work with people and have people skills, and I think the oversaturation we have in our digital devices that can teach us to hide behind screens instead of engage, combined with the polarization of our culture, combined with several other factors, I actually think a quickly dwindling, withering skill is perhaps the most important skill, and that's people skills. And that's how
I think specifically people skills, but let's go one step further. It's resolving conflict. I mean, I want to step into that a little bit because, I think we can all naturally, to an extent, learn how to be friendly, to have friends. Those are skills as well. But I think if you cannot learn how to resolve conflict, which is what we see today. I agree. What you just painted a picture is what we have right now. It's the incubator for what is going on right now in society, and it's no wonder that our relationships are melting and they're becoming superficial. They're becoming only digital. They're becoming in a way that if somebody makes us mad, it's just much easier to run away.
Right.
That's what we do. I'm an unfriend, unfollow. And we learn through social media that we can find another connection someplace else. So I'll unfriend, unfollow. I think through this whole last year and the political cycle, we saw how much families, you made reference to that, how families have been impacted. And I think it's just what I fear is that as a culture, we're moving in this direction where it's so easy to pick up and run. Rather than it is to face conflict.
Cancel culture, and you just ghost people, and you just
run, and rather than working through conflict, which I would argue that working through conflict actually creates deeper relationships.
Absolutely.
And it's you can always be friends or acquaintances with people on a social level and on a superficial level, a very surface type of level. But the moment you have conflict and you work through it, resolve it, you actually begin to set roots with that person. You can have lifelong friendships, and those are the best kind.
Well, you gave, and I just, I've probably been giving way more promos than usual to what we're doing, but I just so believe in this series. And you shared one of my favorite verses this past week in your talk, and it's a great talk no matter what organization you're a part of, whether it's church, but especially for those in a church context. Because let's face it, the number one reason people leave a church is hurt. Disagreement, offense, hurt. In fact, in a faith context, there's a lot of amazing promises from Jesus. But one promise we don't claim a lot is he says, in this world, offenses will come. Offenses will come. But our reaction to offenses can determine our future. Our reaction to hurt can determine the quality of our life. And you share one of my favorite verses is Psalm 92. It was like I'm one of those weird people that has a verse and a word of the year, and it was my word of the year last year. Was flourish. In Psalm 92, those who are planted. And we talked about you talked about roots. And one of the things that make roots go deep, roots of a tree don't actually go deep in sunshine. They only go deep in storm. When a storm beats against a tree, that causes the roots to actually go deeper. But you also mentioned, and I thought it was brilliant at the end, you're going to have to decide in the places in life where you root your life, are you going to be a plant or a transplant? Because every time a plant is moved from place to place, the root system actually dwarfs. And I just wonder what's happening to us, not just in a faith context, but as people. When we hop from friendship to friendship, relationship to relationship, place to place, and instead of letting loyalty and commitment to each other and being willing to dive into conflict that could help us grow together and let our roots go deeper, we actually just keep transplanting our lives, and we only have surface relationships, and we never learn how to dig the good stuff out of life.
I think that's so good. And I think that one of the things that you have to, in order to, I think, develop a skill, and I do think that there's a skill here. I think we all have our natural way, and I think all of us might be a little bit different how we respond to conflict. Maybe based on your personality a little bit, based on, some people are just volatile, some people just erupt, some people shut down, some people I don't want to talk, some people, and I think what we have to do is we have to learn how to develop the skill that is necessary to step into confrontation. And I think that's the big key, and that's what I really wanted to kind of talk about, and maybe see if there's a way that we can kind of parse through, confrontation, and how do we
That's a big deal to people.
It is, and I would say, how do we get a different perspective of confrontation? Because I don't personally love confrontation. I mean, I know people that do. If Kevin was sitting here at this table, I think Kevin is the type that loves confrontation. There's something he gets charged by it, and I don't personally.
You've accused me of that.
What? It's part of me where I said I feel like you're an 8 in hiding because, I think some people do. I think there's others that don't. I think there's some that will avoid it at all costs. Okay. But at what cost?
Right.
That's the real question. And, the truth is, if we're going to create deep roots in our lives, let's consider marriage. Maybe the reason why marriages don't last is because it's easier sometimes to split and run away than it is to stick it out. And, and maybe it is, but not just to stick it out in the way it is, but to actually work through it. And I think that's the key is seeing confrontation is not something to be avoided, but rather what if we could get a perspective where confrontation is actually the key to digging deeper roots.
Right. And I think this could be actually one of our more practical ones that can even give people some handles. But I think on what you're saying is so important, because I think before you even get into the practical, I think it's really important to understand why confrontation is so important. Because I've had people tell me I think in a complimentary way that that one of the things I think by grace I've hopefully to a decent extent learned the skill of is wading into confrontation in hopefully a healthy way. I'm not perfect at it.
You are good at it.
But I think what I would say is, it's not that because I had somebody tell me one time, they told me, they're like, you love to confront. And I'm like, no, I don't think I love to confront. I think that definition would make me a bully.
Yeah.
But I love to confront a whole lot more than I love the alternative. And so I think it's really important before
Why don't you tease it out? What's the alternative?
So
I don't want to just assume that we would all think, what's the alternative? The alternative in some people's minds could be, well, I'll just let this pass and I'll move on.
Yeah.
And
here's the alternative. What you don't confront, you condone.
Yeah.
So the alternative to confrontation is you condone something that should be confronted, and you allow a cancer to spread.
There you go.
So that does not mean that everything needs to be confronted.
Right.
But in an organization, if there's stuff, I told somebody this before, and I think you got to be careful, because there's people on the extreme side that think their job from heaven is they're the correctors. They need to go around correcting everybody. That's equally unhealthy. But for instance, like in our context, one of the things we're passionate about that people actually commend this place on is the culture. The culture is so strong, and it's so healthy. And so I feel a weight, at least in things that are under my sphere of influence that I've been entrusted with, that culture is made of two things: what you create and what you allow. So what you create, what you allow. So I feel, for instance, when it comes to confrontation, almost what I think hopefully is a healthy mantle, a pressure, that if I don't confront that, who will?
Yeah.
That if you don't, maybe it's something in my life. If I have a bad habit, but I don't confront it, I'm condoning and allowing it to spread.
Right.
In family, in organization, in relationships, what I don't confront, I condone. Another really horrible thing about what you don't confront is, let's just say in a basic friendship level, if there are issues, but out of a peacekeeping mindset, because the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers, not the peacekeepers.
Yeah.
Peacemakers are willing to confront to have true peace instead of being passive to create a false sense of peace that comes back to bite you later.
Yeah.
But if you don't confront and address something in a relationship, you know what usually happens? If you don't eventually talk to that person,
you'll talk about them, right?
I'll bet my 401k you're talking about them.
Yeah.
And what's unhealthier?
Yeah.
To talk to. So I would rather have a friend stab me in the face than an enemy stab me in the back.
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, one of the reasons that it's dangerous to not confront is one of the things you do if you're not addressing the issues is you're creating narratives.
Oh yeah, for
How
sure.
often are there things going on?
Yep.
You start to have an offense, things start to get weird, but you don't want to bring something up, and before you know it, you have taken partial evidence, partial truths, and you have spun a narrative in your mind.
Absolutely.
That could be wildly inaccurate. You begin to actually take offenses towards people based on a narrative that you've created.
Have you ever put together? So I've done this before. Where I've done that. And I will work through, this is how messed up we are. I don't think I'm the only one. I will work through in my mind how that conversation is going to go when I get that chance.
Oh my
I will
gosh.
play it out so many times. Well, when they say this, I'm going to say that. I'm going to be prepared for it. And then how many times you end up finding out, A, they didn't even care or notice.
Yeah.
Or B, it was a total miscommunication.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I've had moments. It is embarrassing how many minutes of my life I have wasted walking the halls of my apartment, having conversations in my mind, or in the shower, or in the car, or out loud. And then, here's one of the. I'll tell you a few. I'll probably tell you today a few tools in my toolbox. One of the tools in my toolbox is, while I think it's important to confront, if I'm not sure. Before I say something really strong, unless I'm really, really sure, I always think it's safe to remember that I can always say something, then take something back I've already said. So what I've noticed is there's been so many moments where I have put the narrative in my mind because I've not really just taken the time to address.
Yeah.
And I'm about to finally, and I mean finally, all right, me and you, we need to talk.
Yeah.
And why is this happening? And right as I get to that moment, they smile and be like, oh, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, it's good. And come to find out that they had a tough week last week.
Yeah.
Or they needed a break. Yeah. Or nothing was going on, and they actually had something going on that I read into.
Yeah.
And so I just think for a million reasons, we've got to realize that when we don't confront something that needs to be confronted, it will eventually confront you.
Well, I also like there's something you said that just kind of made me think. If part of changing our perspective of confrontation is if we could get this inside of us that to confront the things you want to protect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think sometimes we don't see it that way, but when you think about, a relationship that matters, to just allow, not just that, but the potential of offense, or to allow whatever that is that's eating away, it is deteriorating the relationship, your marriage, your friendship, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think one of the most important things, and again, what I wanted to try to see if we could just get a fresh look at confrontation is instead of it being the last thing that happens before it's over, which is what happens a lot. It all builds up, even on maybe both sides. If there was a little bit of something said, and it all builds up and we don't do anything, and then finally there's an explosive moment, right? And nobody is actually using any skill. It's just everybody's mad. Yeah. And that's usually the last thing that goes, I'm done. Right. And cut them out of my life. And if we could get a new perspective of confrontation to say, if I care about that person to protect what we have, I should go to them and say something. Does it make sense?
So I think, and again, I am not the picture perfect of health in this. I'm an Enneagram 3. I got my own shadow side to this. Sometimes I can probably come across too strong. So this is not me avoiding any ways in which I need to grow in this at all. We all have areas we need to grow. But I will say in counseling other people when it comes to EQ and even just my friends that they'll sometimes come to me and be like, all right, try to give me some framework on how to approach this conversation this conversation. The number one thing I've noticed is that causes trouble with people emotionally and in relationships is they fall on one of two extremes. Instead of just having a normal relationship with confronting, they'll either unhealthily stuff or they're unhealthily spill. And if you don't learn to have a new relationship, a new understanding, as you were saying, new perspective of confronting, you'll fall on one of two extremes. You'll stuff forever, and it's going to eat you up on the inside because you won't ever address it. And you'll end up gossiping about them. Yeah. And you'll end up being really, really frustrated. And or you'll eventually, because you never just brought it in a healthy, normal, just casual way, if the stuffing doesn't eventually eat you up, that it'll eventually spill out in a moment where you can't take it anymore, and you finally just tell them what's what, and you get in their face, and those moments can wreck relationships. One of the ways to avoid both unhealthy extremes is, what does it look like? This has been one of the biggest coaching things I've just given some people that I've worked with on this is, what does it look like to just change up? Rich Wilkerson Jr. calls it change your connotation of confrontation. Change up the connotation of confrontation. I once heard a great leader say this: a healthy leader learns how to confront without being confrontational.
That's so good. Say it again.
A healthy leader or human being, let's just say, learns how to confront without being confrontational. So what
are you going to help us do that?
I'm not an expert, but I'll try.
Are you going to help us
do
that?
I'll try, yes.
Okay, unpack that a little bit.
Okay, so several things. I'll give handles, and you can tell me to shut up whenever, because this stuff to me is so important. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about it.
First, deciding what needs to be confronted. So I was a student pastor for 5 years. So I had to, at times, think of really insultingly simple handles to give students. Yeah. I'm going to give us today an insultingly simple handle that I think helps whether you're 5 years old or 50 years old. Okay. And it's this: things are either small enough to let go or big enough to address.
There you go. No in between.
No in between.
I like that.
Things are either small enough to let go.
That's good.
Or big enough to address. So if something's bothering you, look, you don't need to confront everything. Don't tell the person in your relationship everything that annoys them.
Yeah.
But if you've gone a few days and you can't pray through it or whatever your faith context is, meditate away from it. If something keeps eating you up on the inside and you've searched your own heart to say, where am I missing it, but it still bothers you, at that point, if you can't let it go, that's the point when you go to that person. You don't wait till it spills over in deep frustration and anger. You don't first go to 3 or 4 people and gossip about them. You go, Matthew 17, to that person. Mm-hmm. That's what Jesus said. Jesus gave really great practical relationship advice. One of the many reasons I love him. He said, if there is an offense, what does he say? Go to Facebook.
Yeah.
Go to your friend.
Passive-aggressive posts.
Passive-aggressive posts. Passive-aggressive. No, he says, go to that person.
Yeah.
So things are either small enough to let go or big enough to address.
I think that's a great place to start right there.
And then once you do that, I think there's several things. In fact, I wrote down a couple things. I think, number one, handle to start growing in confrontation is, and this may sound kind of like an intangible, but I think it's huge, is motivation.
What's your motivation?
What is your before you, especially if it's something that's really deep in your heart, that may sound really intangible. But the motive and the spirit behind your approach is the essence that will spill into every word you speak, everything of how they perceive you, and it will affect the way that conversation goes. So let's get really practical. One of the things I like to ask myself before I approach somebody, especially if you got to be honest with yourself. If there's some frustration there, first off, you got to not do things in the heat of the moment. But when you go to them, you've got to decide, am I wanting to win the argument or win the person? Because I see people at times.
What do you mean? I want to pause on that for a second, because I also think that there's win the argument or win the person.
Yes.
So that would mean, what I would take it to mean is, one, I want to be right and let them know I'm right. Yeah. Win the argument. So it's over when they realize I was right and they were wrong, and they would apologize maybe.
Yes.
That might one way.
So a lot of people on social media this year don't realize that they may have won the argument, but they lost their relationships.
Yeah.
And when you decide why you're going into, and this may sound really cliche. I know there's a lot of cliches about this, but for me, this is a really practical thing that helps me, because what it forces me to do is decide is my motive pride or love. The desire to win the argument is pride.
Yeah.
The desire to win the relationship or the person is love. Andy Stanley made it this way. In every post, in every conversation, in every interaction, you can decide, do I want to make a point or do I want to make a difference? And so when you're about to post, when you're about to go into a conversation, this is why for me, and again, not to get super spiritual, but the more frustrated I am, the more in my flesh I feel just angry, the more I have to make myself spend a few days soaking in prayer, soaking in God's presence, because there's no way that I can do that without humility seeping back into my bones, without perspective, without compassion, begging, God, let me see this person that I'm so frustrated right now through your eyes before I go to talk to them.
So I like the aspect of motive. I think that's a great place to start. So you're suggesting, let me just throw this, you're suggesting that if it's big enough to confront, that before you confront, that you do a little bit of a personal, introspective, deep dive. Why am I upset? Why am I hurt? Why do I keep thinking about this? And kind of try to process what is my motive for the offense? Yeah. Is there saying motive for the offense?
Yeah.
Right.
Because again, we don't that may just sound really ethereal, but at the end of the day, your motive will inform your approach. Yeah. And it will very tangibly decide the way they perceive you, because people can read it. People can read people can read if you're approaching to make a point and to win the argument, or if you're approaching because you actually care about that person.
Yeah. And that what they said hurts you, even if they didn't.
Right.
I would throw in, to win the person or win the argument, I would throw in just, I guess, I want to say a little bit kickback to the language of that. And I understand what you're saying. Win the person. In other words, I want to make sure, I want to get a relationship back on that. Is the word win. I think it's fine. I would just say, I think it's really hard to go into a confrontation if the only result is win or lose. So the only thing I want to just kind of like throw in a caveat to it is, am I going there to win that argument, or am I also going there to listen and hear their side of things?
Yes.
Because I think when I hear win, I think of, okay, I will win the argument, or how do I win that person over to my side of the argument? That's what I hear in my messed up. I'm just telling you the way I am. I'm messed up. When I hear win, I think win.
Yeah,
and it's not win at all costs, and it's not win the.
But it's a good point. My caveat to your caveat would be, if you're going there to win the person's heart, then part of your approach will be to listen.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that to it, because I think when we think win, we think, okay, it's win, lose, or draw.
Right.
And I think part of it is an approach to go, I want to listen and hear what they have to say without having already made up my mind, which I think speaks to the motive of pride.
I saw I think I was telling you, someone sent me the other day, and it's not to get political, whatever your side is on this, but I saw this fascinating Washington Post article, and the title of it was, "The Trump presidency is over, and so are many relationships." And again, whatever side you're on, I think anybody listening understands exactly immediately what that means. And I've had conversations over the past year. We've talked about it till we're blue in the face, that just this past year has been so polarizing. And I've had lifelong friendships that over different issues, they've created a distance, or I won't just put it all on them, but it's just been friction.
Yeah.
And I've gotten on the phone and had long pauses before I've responded, because these things that we're talking about, they really are more than cliches to me. I've literally had to say, this has been a lifelong friendship.
Yeah.
When this conversation is over, and I've hopefully been able to share my view, my side on this, what's the relationship going to look like? And I guess that's what I mean by, I have to ask myself, what's more important to me in this moment, the friendship, the relationship, or my point of view, and hammer it into them until they see just how right I am.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's excellent.
So
that's a great place. You said something in that, though, that I think we should at least kind of talk about. You said that maybe I want to make sure I don't come at them heated. There's the emotions that come up in us when we take an offense to something, and I think. I guess I would ask, in your mind, what is the healthy boundaries when it comes to response time?
Yeah, okay.
Response time to offense. What is the healthy boundaries?
So if practical handle number 1 is motivation, practical handle number 2 is timing.
Is that what you were going to next?
It is.
Okay.
Great minds think alike.
Okay. I don't.
So timing, and I think timing is one of those things that you can only learn with age. So I'm sure you're awesome at it. I just think.
Comedic timing.
Sorry, but I think.
Nice try.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, they're laughing.
I'm a lot older than you are.
Okay, but I'm just saying you're a few decades on me.
Let's not go there.
But honestly, timing is one of the clearest earmarks of wisdom.
Yeah.
Timing when it comes to decisions. Sometimes super younger leaders will wonder, why has this leader not made this decision yet? Yeah. But a leader a little further down the road knows timing is everything. When you make a change, when you make a hire, when you make a fire, when you make in anything in life, Solomon, the wisest person ever, said there's a time and season for everything. And in Proverbs, there's this great verse I love that talks about a timely word. Yeah. It talks about an apt reply, fitly spoken in time, is refreshing. There is something about a timely word. So I think timing in 2 ways. Number 1, it might be what you were saying. First off, timing for you. If you are in the heat of the moment, that is a bad time to respond. Yeah. One of the things that somebody once told me, and I can tell when I'm doing this and when I'm not doing this, is never lead from a place of frustration. So even whether it's with staff or even from a platform, in younger years, I'd be like, why are people not, and I believe in creating cultures of response and engagement. Sure. But in younger years, at times I'll walk off from the platform and I'm like, okay, I let out a frustration. In the same way, in your relationships and in moments of conversation and addressing things, you are never going to be optimally effective when you are leading from a place of frustration. Yeah. So there has to be a centeredness of peace where you've taken the moment to step back and have perspective and think it through and actually reflect in a way that will give you understanding and wisdom on how your response is to be. Get your emotional bearings. Again, not to use that as an excuse for procrastination to never do it, because that's the other extreme. But how do you make sure, first off, your timing is good, but then also timing for the other person?
Yeah.
A wise person will think about, am I in the right frame of mind? But then they'll also think through, are they in the right frame of mind?
Yeah.
And it's never going to be perfect conditions. Proverbs says, he who looks for perfect skies never plants. So you can't wait for perfect conditions. But as much as it is up to you, how do you use wisdom in the timing?
And I think it's tricky when it comes to different. I think we all have different types of relationships, and I think so. I don't think there's any one way to approach them all. I think, when you're married, your kids, you're living with them, you're going to see them all the time. And I think about the Bible. The Bible says some things that are really interesting. Like in one place it says in your anger don't sin, and it says don't let the sun go down in your anger. I know that's kind of a rhythm that my wife and I have always tried to. It's like, you're angry and you fight, but the hope is to resolve it maybe before you go to sleep. Now, that's not always possible. It's not always possible in every relationship. Work relationships are different. Longer distance ones are different. So I think that there's finding an appropriate balance to, I need to cool down, because I think we all know what it's like when you feel your body physically change. I've had that those moments, and typically when I respond to those moments, they're not good. You know what I mean? You feel your heartbeat start to go, your palms start to get sweaty. You just in the back, like, I can tell when it's coming.
Weak, vomit.
I can tell. I don't usually do that.
I was quoting an Eminem song.
Oh, okay. What was it? Finish it.
8 Mile.
Can you sing it?
Knees weak, vomit, sweat.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Mom spaghetti.
Mama spaghetti. Okay. No. But I think that there's finding an appropriate balance to dealing with it, so that it's fresh enough. Here's the thing I would caution to say. Sometimes if you allow things to go too far, then it's not a fresh enough offense. Because here's what happens sometimes, right? You sit on something for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then you go back to them. Hey, you remember when you said this, and this? And they go, I don't recall that at all. You know what I mean? It's really hard to deal with something that the other person, especially if it was not a big deal, or they just said something flippantly and you took it to offense. And so I think it depends probably on maybe the weight of it or the size of the offense, in your heart. And so one of those things that to me, I think it's about finding a healthy balance. Like, don't wait too long that it also sits and eats you up. Because the longer you sit alone, the more your imagination goes, and the more I've already figured out how I'm running them out of my life.
And can I just tell you, like, that the relief when you finally, it's not always, because you can't always predict how the other person. I love what Paul says. He says, live at peaceably with all men as much as is up to you.
As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone.
The relief that comes when you finally have that conversation you've been dreading. I mean, that's why I love what you said. The peace that comes when you did what you could do. To bring something that you needed to bring. And so, okay.
That's good timing.
So
we did that.
So practical handle, motivation. Practical handle number 2 is timing. Practical handle number 3, in this digital age, I just want to put an exclamation point on this, is the format. And I want to give a really practical handle.
Okay.
Don't ever address personal issues in impersonal formats.
It's good.
So if you want to
address personal issues
in impersonal avenues.
What's a non-personal issue?
So if you want to text about what you're having for dinner, that's awesome. If you want to text memes and jokes, that's awesome. If you want to post about whatever, if you want to email about the newest thing at work. But if there is something eating you up relationally, or if there is even a chance of a misinterpretation about an interpersonal issue, I just got to say this. I know this is affected as we cross generational and the way people. I know. But one of the things that I probably drive some people crazy with is I just refuse to do it. I refuse to do it. I'll give a really personal example of, to me, what could have been a really helpful conversation. I don't even say confrontation is, really practical here at church. In the summer, everything last year, we obviously had to come together to be in one location. And after this building, with all of its spaciousness for COVID and social distancing, we stepped into it. We came over here. We over-communicated as best as we could in Lancaster. Yeah. Hindsight, we're always like, man, could we have done this more or this more? But we're in COVID, and you're hoping everybody is coming and hearing the communication. But basically what we said was, we don't know what the future holds. All we know is right now, with our capacity, with our resources, is that we need to be together in one location, the staff in one place. And this building we've been building for 4 years is about to open. It has space for social distancing. That's what we're going to do. People started sending me posts from people on Facebook that had not even come to meetings where we had talked about this and said, how dare this group be, I can't even remember, something to the effect of be unloyal, turn their backs on us, leave us behind. And basically most of what they said in the post wasn't true.
Yeah.
So I did, some of these people I didn't even know that well, but I was like, you know what, like I can tell behind this is hurt.
Yeah.
So I sent an immediate private message and said, hey, I'm so sorry that you feel this way. I don't think everything of apparently how you've received this communication is 100% true. I'd love to talk on the phone so we could actually hash through this and have a conversation. And every single time, no response. Which showed me a few things.
A lot of maturity.
Yes. And that it is so much easier to ghost and to cancel and to post and to vent an impersonal means than it is in the 21st century to do the hard work of engaging face-to-face or at least over the phone with another human being. And when it comes to navigating relational conflicts, you at least better be on the phone to where you can hear the nuance in their voice. Yeah. You can actually read into how they're receiving. You can hear their emotions. You can perceive where they're at in their minds and in their heart. And I just think, can we just forever just do away? Yeah. And maybe I know for some people it's a confidence thing. For some people it's just like, I'm just not great at communicating like that. But I just wonder how many misunderstandings would be cleared up and how many relationships could be healed if people would just refuse to use impersonal means to communicate personal issues.
I agree. I think that's so beautifully said. I think it's so true. There is much more to communication than just what is said. The body language.
Most of it's nonverbal.
Most of it's nonverbal. And I think just to me, I've kind of gotten to a point where it speaks a lot. And this is kind of some of the reason I was diving into this a little bit with our church as a community, because it speaks to me a lot of the emotional immaturity of people today in our culture. I even addressed and said it shocks me how many spiritually deep / mature people think they are, are so emotionally immature that they would do things like that. You know what I mean? Whether it's like, oh, no, we don't actually want to talk about it. We don't want to resolve it. We just want to say what we want to say. Yeah. And, and I just think that is beautiful, especially if you're younger and if you like this podcast, you're following this podcast, you're watching it. I just want to encourage you, because I know I see it in my kids, and they've really grown up in a time where it's much easier to just text or to snap or to whatever, post, even wars and social media wars and things that happen. It's just over passive-aggressive statements and posts and comments. Rather than actually going to the person. Yeah. And I would imagine that a majority of issues can be resolved face-to-face.
And can I just say this?
Majority of them.
This is just, and not to be too blunt, but to me, part of just being a normal human, mature adult is learning how to go to a person. Yeah. If you're in a church context that is poured into you, before you ever just leave out of an offense, even apart from being a Christ
follower. Can we talk about church hurt? It sounds like we want to talk about church hurt for a little bit.
Okay, can I give you 2 more practical handles?
All right, you better do them, because I want to
really
say
quickly
something about church hurt before we go.
This may be way too practical. Okay. So we've gone into motivation, timing, format. 2 more. Okay. I'll go through quickly. Number four is delivery. So gentle and kind, but direct. Look, if One of the things I tell people that are so afraid, and again, I know there's so many different personalities. So somebody watching this may be thinking, well, you're 2 3s.
Yeah.
So 3s need to learn this about confrontation. Every personality type has their strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. So I understand I have my weaknesses. But one of the things I always tell people is if you would learn to make confrontation, healthy confrontation, not being confrontational, but just healthy, a rhythm of addressing things as they come in the right way. If you would make that normal, you wouldn't be so afraid of confrontation. Because confrontation does not have to be this big thing of, all right, now we're sitting down. For me, one of the things I love, I'll pick on like Pastor Jesse for a minute. And part of it is we have this relationship, but Pastor Jesse and I love, one of the things I love about him, we're very different. I'm a 3, he's a 5, but one of the things he actually tells me he appreciates about me is that without making it a big deal, if something comes up, I'll just be like, hey, why'd you do that? Hey, so, just out of curiosity, not to, whatever, but why this? Yeah. And he can do the same thing with me. And I think some people think that it has to be this big, dramatic, like in your face. But confrontation is just something as simple as make it part of your normal rhythm to just be lovingly direct. And just to say, hey, we have a great relationship. I know that, like, we always want to maintain our relationship and our communication. So just for the sake of, because I care about you, hey, help me understand why this.
Yeah.
I know psychologists say use feel things. Hey, you may not even realize it, but when you did this the other day, it felt like this. Hey, you may not even realize that when you're late. I know you probably don't mean a thing in the world by it. Give people the benefit of the doubt. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 13 that love always trusts. So extend trust first and just tell somebody. So you probably don't mean it this way, but when you do this, it communicates this. But if we can, the Bible says that a gentle answer turns away wrath. Yeah. So if you're going to confront without being confrontational, simply be kind and humble, but direct, and just make it normal. It does not have to be this big dramatic thing. I know that it may seem.
I think it becomes big and dramatic because we don't address things, and they build. They build inside of us because until we're about to erupt.
Ugly things grow in the dark, and if you wait till it's the smoke monster from Lost, you're going to have problems.
There you go.
Fifth.
Number 5.
Number 5. This is the last one. And this is so simple, but it's so important. When possible, relational equity. Relational equity. Yeah. So this is... You can say the toughest things to the people that you've been in the deepest trenches with. Yeah. And the closer you are in relationship, the more. That's why, I mean, being a leader in church, people come up to me all the time and give me, hey, I just feel like God wanted me to tell you this. That's awesome. Yeah. I'll listen. I'll write it down, and we'll put that on the shelf, and we'll see if that's. Depends. But the closer somebody is to me, whether it's correction or affirmation or whatever it is, the more weight it holds. And we all know this to be true. But I would just, but maybe just a practical of this is, psychologists tell us for every negative comment there needs to be 10 positive. Yep. So I'll just let me own it, so that I especially don't come across as any kind of expert in this. Even though I feel like. My friends would describe me as a highly encouraging person. Yeah. I love to encourage people. One of my passions in leadership is to pour into people and to speak life into people and pour out of it. But when I am in a work context and trying to get stuff done, my type A, red, Enneagram 3 side of me, if I'm not careful, people that are really, really confident that I assume they know they're awesome, I can let weeks go by where I don't affirm. And one of the mistakes I've made before, I had somebody tell me one time, actually this past year, said, hey, I just got to be straight up. I feel like I'm swinging and missing the ball. And I said, why? And they said, well, I don't know if you realize it, but and they went down the line, our last 6, 7 conversations were corrective. And I realized that I had 6 or 7 corrective conversations, and I hadn't planned it that way. It wasn't on purpose. Yeah. But just busyness of life, whatever my excuse was, I had multiple corrective conversations without affirmation. And the truth is, the deeper trust deposits you have with somebody by not BS, not blowing smoke, but just speaking life into them, the more you celebrate what's right with people, the more they'll be able to hear it when in the right way, in the right timing, in the right tone, you share with them areas that they can grow.
Yeah, that's good. So those are good. What were real quick? Just
so
say all
the
5 of them real quick.
Are motivation, timing, format, delivery, relational equity.
Relational equity. Those are good. Very good handles. And I think hopefully I think those are some really good skills to, maybe if you have a situation that you have to confront, then maybe this will be timely, and you'll be able to kind of go, okay, what's my motive and what's the right format? Now I need to call them up, and then we need to meet face to face, or I'm gonna, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Hey, can I add a PS?
Yeah.
Just own it too. If you're frustrated with something,
yeah.
Can I just share with anybody listening? One of the most annoying statements you could ever hear is, several people are saying
Oh
this.
gosh.
Everyone is saying this. Just so you know, it is an automatic understanding for anyone that's been in
done.
leadership for a while that everyone means maybe one or two people.
Yeah, or it means the people that you gossiped with, so that they then carried an offense with you.
Yes, it means
And that's what
negativity is attractive. So if you're frustrated, can I just say, just own it.
Yeah.
This is how I feel.
Yes.
And this is why I feel this way.
I feel like that is so one of the things my father-in-law always taught, you know, when dealing with difficult conversations, and I always remember this, is somebody would bring it up, he'd say, I don't deal in generalities. I'm not.
Yeah.
Well, everybody feels that way.
Yeah.
I'm not talking to everybody. I'm talking about you.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of times we want to leverage other people. We heard them say this, so they must feel that way. Or I talked about this person, and they were like, gosh, that's awful. I can't believe that. I know. Can you believe it? You know, the next thing you know, well, it's not just me. Well, yeah, I had this moment, you know, that thing happened.
That shows
you've
been gossiping, and it weakens your opinion.
It does. So I don't use that.
Yeah.
And the moment you go into that and you go, well, a lot of people are feeling this way. Well, then if a lot of people are feeling that way, then you ought to encourage all the other people to go set up a meeting with that person or whatever. Right. But you should not speak for everybody else.
Right.
And
you know how Dave Ramsey, he has one of the top companies in the U.S. You know how he defines gossip? Horizontal chatter.
Yeah.
And if you do it once, you're fired.
Yeah. I mean, it allows cancer.
If you're not going vertically to the person you have a relationship with, and you're just horizontally murmuring, it's poison.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the things that I would just add to it, just a few thoughts. I think there's something about maturity. I want to go back to one of the things you said earlier. I think a big question to ask yourself if you're upset all the time is, why am I always offended?
Yeah.
I think that there are just some that are just, I think you can get to a place in your growth, your maturity, both spiritual and emotional maturity, where you can stop being so offendable all the time. I just think we're in a culture where we're so easily offended. Yeah. And it's like, here's what it tells me. If you're so easily offended, if everything is, this person says this, you're offended, I think it probably speaks to a lack of confidence in yourself. It speaks to a lack of depth. It just does. Like, I loved how you said earlier, it's like, hey, if it's small enough to let it go, then you don't need to confront it. Like, I want to be the kind of person that is not easily offended.
Yeah.
That to me is really important.
I heard somebody tell me one time, if you want to live a life supernaturally blessed by God, strive to live an unoffendable life. It's not possible to never have offenses come, but it is possible by God's grace to stop letting offenses take root.
Yes.
And I just think the easily offended person is the person who has lost joy and lost vision. You know, we talk about church hurt, and I know we were coming up at an hour, so I think this has been a very practical conversation. But I think, you know, I came out of a really, for what a lot of people was a traumatic church hurt coming out of Lexington, Kentucky. Our church plant, it just, there could be books written about how that ended. And a lot of, just to be honest, a lot of marriages dissolved out of it. There's a lot of heartbreak that came out of it. But it's interesting at times to meet people that several years later, their conversation is still the past. Yeah. And whenever I meet somebody that is still trapped in resentment and trapped in that, I think several things. Even if they throw stones at me, there's actually a side of me that feels compassion, because I think, oh, you must be so miserable. Yeah. Because it is only someone with no vision for the future that stays trapped in the past. Yep. Joyful people are not offendable people. If you are really busy, on fire, passion, creating the future, you don't have the emotional energy or desire to throw stones and tear anyone down. And I think a great goal, life goal for me, for anyone listening, is to, what would it look like to just never tear another human being down with your words? To just never speak ill of other people. I had a friend that got to host a lot of these leaders that God has raised up in the world, and a couple years ago, he got to host Chad Veach, who's this pastor at a church called Zoe in Los Angeles. Incredible church. He's a New York Times best-selling author. And I said, what stood out from your time with him? And he said the number one thing that stood out all the time I was around him is I just never heard him speak one negative word about another person. Wow. And he said that when other people at the table, even other pastors, in kind of a roundabout, subtle way would start talking about somebody, he said he watched him get really uncomfortable, and then he watched him think, and then he said he watched him after that get creative and find several ways to say, you know what I love about that person though?
Yeah.
you know what I really like about that person? And
that's a skill.
That challenged me. I'm like, I want to be that person.
Yeah.
That if I have tough words, it's only going to be in love to that person's face.
Yeah.
I would rather brag on people behind their backs, but I want to be the kind of person to I'm not there yet, but I feel like I'm getting there. Yeah. I want to get to the place where I never speak ill of another person.
But it is so good. I just think that's so good, and to be that kind of person. And I think one of the reasons why I leaned into this a little bit just with our church is because I see in our culture that it's so easy to be a transplant and never have deep roots. And I've been the recipient of what it means to be able to establish deep roots in a church community. I've basically only been in 2 churches my entire life, with the exception of living in Europe for 3 days, and we didn't really get connected anywhere there. But from the time I was 5 and on, I've really only been in 2 churches my entire life. And I have seen the benefits of that for my kids. And I said this even at churches, that my kids have had to see us deal with conflict and us deal with situations, and people say things in this. And I really think that your kids might learn a whole lot more about you from watching you deal with hard things in confrontation than they will just the little small talk and the little things. I think they will get anchors for their life by seeing you have an anchor in your life. And I just think it's just too common today. And I'm not saying that just as someone who's a pastor, but it's just too common to just pick up at the drop of a hat, and I'll just go over here, and it's like little kids. I'll pick up my toys, and you're not playing with them. I'm going someplace else.
Right.
And I'm like, you're hurting yourself.
Right.
You're hurting yourself.
Yeah.
And almost to like, I understand that there is church hurt. I understand. Why? Because I said, when you're a part of a church, and I'm saying really a part of a church, you are a part of a family.
Yeah.
And I wanted people to understand, I asked, have you ever been hurt in your family? Yeah. You ever been hurt in your marriage? My guess is yes. Why? Because you cannot live that close and that authentic in relationship with somebody else and not be hurt. Yep. And so to think, I'm going to go to church and, well, that person, and a lot of times it's not leadership. Sometimes it's other people, and that person, well, they didn't like me, and whatever, issues. When you, drop a hat, just pick up and move. Right. And rather than realizing that family, I need to work through this. Yeah. I need to go to the person. Yeah. Like you said, as Jesus said, go to the person and show them what they did. And if they do not accept or take ownership of it, go and get 2 others, people to come and go, I want to have, can we have a conversation and have somebody else there in the room? If that doesn't work, then tell it to the leaders of the church. Like involved, because at the end of the day, confrontation conflict that is not resolved through confrontation, going there, will turn into cancer. Yeah. And it can just erode a community. Yeah. And so I think, one of the things I was just really wanting to lead our church through is to say the most loving thing that we could do as leaders is confront something in your life that is offensive to God. Yeah. Something in your life that could cause sin, that can cause death, that can mess up relationships. Yeah. And so I just said we need to have the boldness to do it in a loving way. Yeah. And to be able to approach it in a loving way. And I want to kind of just leave you with this thought, just this challenge to say, if you're hurt and offended by somebody, could be one of us. If you're hurt and offended, then reach out. Yeah. And try to have a conversation. Yeah. And don't always go into the conversation. I mean, listen, feelings are real. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important in any kind of conversation, whether you're going to somebody or they come to you, is to you can validate their feelings. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean that what you intended to say was that, you know? And I think it's important that we always remember that how somebody feels in a moment of conflict and confrontation is real. Right. even if what caused
Affirm
it
their
is
perspective.
even if what caused it may not be the truth.
Right.
That well, when you said this, I assume that you meant this. That's not what I meant.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I understand how you may have gotten it, and show some empathy.
Yeah.
They're hurting.
Yeah.
I mean, hurt people, and
Right.
that's why. And so I've appreciated the handles that you've given. I know that at times, the safest thing to do, if there's real deep hurt, it might be to confront it in a way that you can that's healthy, and it might be that you don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
But that should not be the MO for your life.
Right.
That should not be what happens, because if so, you will find yourself at some point very lonely.
Yeah.
And you will not be able to enjoy this life, I believe, the way God intended,
Yeah.
because it's through relationships, and
Yep.
it's only through relationships.
Yep.
As we saw with the royal family, that you can have it all,
Yep.
but if you don't have each other,
Yep.
you're going to be miserable.
Yep.
And it's so true.
That's so good.
Any last thoughts?
No,
great.
it's great.
Man, well, thank you for just coming and sharing your wisdom. I've got to say, Russ is one of the best I know at dealing with confrontation. You absolutely are. He says things, and he's like, well, this situation happened, and they said this, and I said that, and I'm like, that is so good. I'm so jealous, because I don't know that I would have thought of that on the spot like that. He is so good at it. So if you want more tips and pointers in confrontation, make sure you look up Russ and send an email, and he would be glad to coach you on it. But I just think some brilliant handles that you gave. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was something that maybe you can kind of put in your toolbox.
Yeah.
This is one of those personal skills. And instead of writing people off, maybe go and let's look at confrontation from a new perspective.
Yeah.
And see it as a way to dig deep roots with people.
Yeah.
So, hey, thank you so much for sticking with us today and tuning in. And we would love for you, if this was helpful, if you enjoyed this conversation, would you share it with a friend or a family member? As always, we love it if you would like and subscribe so you get all the updated content that comes out. Again, share it with others, reviews, and shoot us an email. We love emails, and we enjoy these conversations. We hope that you do. Until next time, we'll see you later.